So as I've said before, I see myself as quite fortunate in the fact that I have this YouTube channel. Now I don't mean that with the revenue it brings in, I don't even necessarily mean the amount of subscribers it's got, because there's not really a lot. Even though we could be talking about greater volumes in the future, even at the minute, what I'm really grateful for is the ability to hear the opinions of many different types of people. We're talking about people from all different age ranges, all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all around the world, and that is a really special experience if you ask me. Obviously, not everybody's going to have the same sort of views on life and the world, that just goes without saying. But one that I hear a surprising amount is people saying life's not really going to get better in our lifetime. And now obviously, for me to say it would or it wouldn't, would be, in my opinion, quite silly, maybe even stupid, because I can't predict the future. And there could be so many different factors that change that could influence things. In some ways, in the last 20 years, which is over my lifetime, I think certain things that I've been aware of have gotten worse. Straight up. I think there are some things where society and people and the world seems to actually be moving backwards. Most of these issues I talk about here on the channel. But how's life as a whole? So we'll talk about how life is in our times first, right? In the 2020s. That's where we're at. So at this stage in life, and I'm not going to talk about my own personal experiences too much unless they're relevant to this. I want to talk about a general view so it can be applicable to everybody. At the minute, we have got a lot of issues, right? I think the main concern for people here in the UK and around the Western world, as people see it, is money. Money is a big problem for a lot of people here. Obviously, we can talk about potential conflicts and stuff like that, but that's always been a fact of life since basically the beginning of time, right? I'm not saying it's right because I don't think it is, but it is almost a fact. It's almost an inevitability as well. But yeah, there's always things like that that will happen, but what I'm saying is the main thing for most people's day-to-day life at this stage, like I say, everything could change super fast, but it seems to be money. They don't have enough, they don't make enough, they can't get enough, and that's challenging. But there's also a lot of really great things about our time. Think about the access to things that we have now that even kings didn't have access to in the past. Warm water, clean water, a life of relative peace, the ability to eat foods from all around the planet delivered to you, and you don't even have to cook. You don't have to have any servants or anything like that, because it comes on Deliveroo and Uber Eats, right? Others are available, but you get the point. So it's easy in a lot of ways, and it's great in a lot of ways. Look at the device that's in your hand, right? If it's not in your hand, it'll be a computer, and the same's similarly true. Amazing technology that no one has ever accessed. And we see new technologies coming out all the time. Now obviously that's a blessing and a curse, just like the mobile phone, the internet, and the computer were as well. They brought with them a lot of benefits. In my opinion, life wouldn't be, well, I know for a fact life wouldn't be what it is now if we didn't have these creations. But would it be more simple? Probably. One thing that I would say is I think people in today's generation are losing touch with how privileged we are starting at, what a great starting point we're at. I was having a discussion with a friend the other day who implied that there's probably more poor people about in the UK than there has been at any point in history. And I just sat there like, do you not know that 200 years ago people were getting paid very, very little, and I'm not talking like £10 an hour, obviously significantly less. You know, Europe and England was poor for the majority of people. And I think people get their heads into shows like Downtown Abbey, for example, and they see the lovely horses and the mansions. Yeah, that was how it was for the rich people. And the poor people were working in factories at age 10, going to poorhouses and stuff like that. It's not any worse than then. For most people, it's significantly better. And that's another thing that I want to talk about in terms of life walking backwards, right? Because in some ways, I would say it is. In some ways it appears, and I don't want to say it necessarily, but it does appear that in some ways we're going back to that system. For example, look at people now not having enough money to even buy food, right? Now, obviously, there is still in this generation a way to make your way out of that. You can still make it to being very rich, I think. But things like jobs getting, well, simply paying less, it makes you question where things are going in the future, right? But the first thing I want to point out is times getting better, getting worse, or getting better or getting worse for who? Now, it's not a new concept, and that's why I wanted to explain it just then. For the kings and the queens and the royalty and the rich people of society, life was great in the past, right? In the 40s and 50s, you might have had access to flight for the first time and stuff like that. And then before that, you might have been able to go on luxurious cruises, but that was never poor people, right? Right now, in 2024, it's not unreasonable that your family of, 2 people, 4 people, 5 people, if whether it's you and your kids, or your kids are grown up and they need to work or whatever, it's not unreasonable that a family of, let's say even 5 or 6, can go on a holiday to a foreign country. That's pretty good. Most houses are quite okay. So what I'm saying is, yeah, it's still not great for your average person, but at what point in history ever has it been amazing for average people? That's just not how the world has worked. Now, is that right or wrong? That's a different question, and arguably that's a topic for a different video. But it is, I think, a fact, right? You can't deny it. You think it was the peasants that were living rich, but then you think about things like peasants and you know it's not true. So is it getting worse or better? I think it is currently better, right? Undeniably. Even from the 1950s, right? People like to quote the 50s and the 40s as a time of privilege and opulence and everything like that. And I don't know about every country, right? We can talk about the US and whatever, but I know stories from my granddad growing up in the UK, England, not too far even from here. Stories of how he had no furniture and whatever. Now, it's true that he has made it to a nice position in life, right? So, was there opportunities for him? Yes, and he made it out of that place. But what I'm saying is there was even people growing up like that 70 years ago or less, right? There probably still is, and I'm not saying otherwise, but both sides are true, right? What I'm saying is the people who had this extreme privilege in the past were the rich, and the wealth gaps were wider. To make out like that's not true is missing out a crucial part of history, and it's changing our views on what it means to be going forwards or going backwards. If we're comparing ourselves to the likes of Bridgerton, of course we're moving backwards. But that's a show basically documenting the richest people of the day. You know, the idea of Victorian ladies and gentlemen being super well dressed. Yeah, styles may have been better in the past if we talk about formality and stuff like that. But these people who are dressed up looking super nice, having a great time, were the rich, right? Then people say, well, if they were so rich back in their day, why are they taking a walk down Blackpool beachfront, not somewhere abroad? It's because our worldviews that changed now. Perhaps back in their day, 1900 or earlier, these photos, these trips, even if it is only 50 or 60 miles, would have been a big deal, right? Whereas now, it's not that impossible or unexpected that you'll probably have a holiday to Spain this year, which is hundreds of miles away, probably thousands of miles away. So our worldviews is changing, or are changing, is part one that I'd say. We're looking at a time gone by and expecting the same results. For an easy comparison, right, because sometimes an analogy helps, that's like looking at a 1980s Ferrari and comparing it to a brand new Volkswagen Golf and saying that the Ferrari's better and cars of the past were better. You're looking at the automotive pinnacle from back in its time and comparing it to the average of now. There's no wonder why you're not satisfied with the results. They're not the same thing. They weren't the same thing. They weren't even built for the same thing at the time of manufacture. They are not the same. They're not comparable. And the same's true with average life of the past and average life now. It is still considerably better now. Like I say, the main concern people have is money, which in contrast to your health being a genuine constant threat is a plus. In contrast to the potential of wars is a massive plus. And I could go on, right? I could go on. So that's the past. And I think that's why people are completely confused about the past. Because Roman kings and emperors lived brilliantly. Yes, of course, and so did their friends and the people in their, for want of a better understanding, governments did as well and stuff like that. But that's not your average person. right? So back on point of our times. The next thing I hear is times for us are going to get worse. And I've made a video, I think it was on this very bench, where I spoke about this thing. So what indicates good times, right? Obviously, there's certain things that are outside of us as civilians, individuals, outside of our control, right? We can't really control natural events, natural disasters and stuff like that. Climate change, possibly. We can't control, it seems these days, that we can't control our politicians, so we can't control wars and stuff like that. We can't control our health. We never could control our health, really. You can do things to influence it, but you can't control it. So, what can you control? Well, look, it's factors that you can control through money, right? So making money is a big thing. And obviously a lot of people say it's getting harder to make money. And like I say, I made a video on this exact bench where I spoke about it. It's because, unlike the Victorian times and the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that, people in this generation, and in the last generation as well, I would say, haven't taken the same jump that people have with the Industrial Revolution, right? It's not 1991 anymore, and I've done this myself, so if I can teach younger people, or even older people who might be thinking about the same thing, I would say don't make this mistake, right? It's not 1991 anymore. So basically, the concept of things like, well, most degrees, pointless. The future is either in the future or the past. And let me explain what I mean. There's two sorts of jobs I think are going to have massive gaps in the future. Number one is the old jobs. Things like bricklaying, labouring, plumbing, manufacturing. All that sort of stuff that people have been doing for, well, hundreds of years. And the other side of things, we're going to have the new jobs. Coding, AI, cybersecurity, all of these different fields. They're going to be the new jobs, right? And the two are going to go hand in hand because they're different markets and they're going to attract a different sort of people, but they're both going to provide the potential to make a decent income in the future. So that's one way that we can adapt to the future times. And another one is to have a look at different ways of making money. Like I say, we've been given a lot of different technology in our generations. The internet, the computer. Look, I won't even lie, it's not a fortune, but I make money from these videos. So I'm not saying that that's even going to be my way out, right? It makes me basically nothing. But it's one way that you can make money, not straight away, but it's one way that you can make money today, right? Just by making videos. And obviously there's a lot of different ways to make money. The best way to do it is have a quick Google or watch a video on YouTube about it. You'll learn an awful lot. I even have my Patreon about reselling. Link is in the bio. But this is the point, right? This is my point. My point is, we talk about times getting worse for our generation. But the first thing that we fail to understand is what times have genuinely looked like in the past. We're not talking about the 1980s idea of success, because that's not what life ever was. In fact, I might have to take that back. Maybe the 80s and the 90s and the 70s could have possibly been the first time that I am aware of. I wasn't there, obviously, but that times were genuinely decent, and the times that we're living in now as well, because everyone can make something of themselves, like I said. So we're still there, right? We're definitely still there. But with this for the context of this issue, we fail to understand what the old times were like. The 50s, the 20s, the Victorian times, and before. They weren't a time where, you could make your way being super successful, doing loads of... It's a different time. It's a different time, and I think the fact that we can't get our heads around this concept at all, we can't even understand it, proves kind of how entitled we are. So times are already getting better, right? Maybe in the last 10 years they're taking a cut, I will agree, but hey, we're all doing fairly okay. Now, the reason why a lot of life conditions I think are going to take a cut for people in the future, and I made a full video on it, is because they're not awakening to the conditions of the times. They're not awakening to the fact that the internet's a new way to make money. They're not awakening to the fact that AI is going to take their job. They're not awakening to the fact that the currency that most of us earn in is going down the drain, and we're not finding a way to offset that inflation. They're not acknowledging it, and that's going to long term affect them, right? And then people are going to be sat there like, why are times getting worse? Look, times have never been good for the poorest in society, and that's just a fact, right? Maybe in the last, 40 years or so, or 50 or 60 years, they've been more bearable. maybe since World War II, but they've never been great, right? There was never a time that I'm aware of, after doing quite a bit of research, that times would have been, as good for the poor as they were for the rich, right? We watch a lot of TV and period drama that makes us believe it was, but it wasn't. So, is life going to get better? Well, that depends on you. Because think about the future, right? For the people who own stock, for the people who own properties, for the people who work on their business now and take advantage of trends in the market, is life going to get better for them? Well, think about it. Cars are getting faster. House technology in some ways is getting better. Technology is getting better. Think about the things in the future that you'll be able to use that we can't even fathom now. And I don't mean in 200 years, I mean in 20 years. Things that we can't even imagine yet, right? There's going to be a lot more privilege and brilliance to enjoy, but not for everyone. And our time's probably going to keep getting worse for those who do not acknowledge this. Probably they are. But it doesn't mean that there's not a chance to make something. But I've said this enough times. It's about acknowledging it, right? Because look at today's market, right? We've got an election coming up here in the UK. From what I see, it seems like a lot of the candidates are just as incompetent as each other. We've got terrible inflation going on in most countries in the Western world, at least. That's not going to be good for your income. And then we've got jobs not paying what they should. That one kind of speaks for itself. But times are getting worse? Well, I don't think they are. I think certain things are getting more challenging. Every time has had its challenges, every time has had its privileges and its drawbacks. But an idea that we seem to have tied in with the past is that times were always much better. And no, they weren't, right? So what am I saying here? If your life is poor, and if you're not doing anything to change that situation, the future probably is going to get more miserable for you. And I don't just mean poor, I mean actually quite average. This is just my opinion, right? And of course, right now, I am, in terms of income, basically in the average zone. But I'm 20 years old, right? I'm trying to increase this. I've got time. And I'm not wasting that time, I'm using it. But what I'm saying is this. It seems like the average person is getting it from left, right and centre. Inflation is hitting everything, right? Undeniably. Jobs are getting cut because AI is taking over. Again, currencies are weakening, and assets are becoming more expensive to buy. But for those who own these assets, get dividends off the stock that goes up, sells property that's inflated. What's the benefit then? The benefit is you can be at the pinnacle of human evolution, and that's always going to be true. One place becomes bad, or dangerous, or unsafe, or unstable, well, you can move to another because you're not tied to a location financially. So yeah, there's always opportunities. And I think as time goes on, technology, life expectancies possibly, living conditions for the rich will continue to improve. But if you sat there thinking, your pay's going to grow when inflation's taking 10% of it each, year? In some countries, and you're not getting the pay increase that you need, and your cost of housing is going up on top of that, you are not going to be able to continue to have a life, I think, of this level of privilege. Now, I hope that I'm wrong, because unlike a lot of these greedy companies, I do genuinely care what happens to people, right? And I think that everybody who puts in a good effort, because if you go to work, waking up at 7 or 6 to go to work at 8 or 9, come home, tired, you're putting in a good effort in life, and you should be rewarded for that. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be how a lot of big companies see things. So there becomes a point at that stage where we've got to say, okay, well, it'd be nice if the world worked like that, but there's no point lying. We've got to acknowledge objective realities. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a worse place. I think the objective reality of this situation is, look, we are doing okay. And even if you do work in a job and stack some cash just in a job, you can still get quite rich if you invest correctly. You could afford to buy a house quite quickly and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is, hey, don't look at times getting worse when you're comparing it to times of the past. Look at the reality of times back then. Was it like that for everybody? Do some research and you may be surprised. So I think that's important for a bit of reality. Also, there's a few more things. I think there are now opportunities which already mean that life is better. Like I say, you can make money anywhere in the world now if you're clever about it. And you can change your social status, right? You can be born poor, dirt poor, and become a billionaire in a lifetime. It might be quite rare, it might be extremely difficult, but it's not hard. No, it is hard, forgive me. It is hard, but it's not impossible. And becoming a millionaire in a lifetime, I would argue, is not hard. All you need to do is work in a 9 to 5 and buy the right property, right? It really is that simple to become a millionaire in our time. Now, obviously, £1 million stretches a bit less, but it's still a large amount. So, I guess what I'm saying is, we always look at things through rose-tinted glasses, and in the context of this issue, I just don't believe it's true. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you have to say on this issue. I think we're in a good time, and we've got the potential to keep that going, but people need to acknowledge it. So let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you soon. Goodbye.